Hi, it's Professor Barati. I want to go over some of the homework assignments in homework week 4 under my counting lab for earnings per share. So problem 1 basically is a fairly simple problem, and the solution is as follows. Our company reported net income equal to $1,280,000. So that number basically goes right here as your net income. But this $1,280,000 includes $670,000 after-tax loss from discontinued operations, which we learned about in prior class on the chapter on discontinued operations. So if our net income has a loss of $670,000 in it, therefore we have to gross up the $1,280,000. We have to add the $670,000 to it to get income from operations, which is one of the questions in the problem. The company has 770,000 common shares outstanding for the entire year. Prepare a partial income statement beginning with income from continuing operations and include earnings per share. So we already covered the income from continuing operations by simply adding the loss from discontinued operations back to net income to get the $1,950,000. The earnings per share on income from continuing operations is going to be the $1,950,000 divided by the 770,000 common shares. The earnings per share on loss from discontinued operations is going to be the 670,000 divided by the same 770,000 common shares. Earnings per share on net income is you're going to take your net income number and divide it by the number of common shares outstanding to get the earnings per share net income. So essentially that's the approach you want to take to solve problem 1. Problem 2 is a basic earnings per share calculation. So Albertson Company reported $239,400 of net income for the current year. It has 100,500 shares of common shares outstanding for the entire year, and another 50,600 shares of 4% non-convertible cumulative $4 par value preferred shares. Now that's a lot to process. What's missing in this problem that you usually get in your problems as a given is the dollar amount of the preferred shares. So the problem wants you to calculate the value of the par shares on the balance sheet so that you can figure out the dividend requirement. Because as you know, dividend requirements come off net income in the numerator for your basic earnings per share. So your basic earnings per share calculation numerator is net income minus preferred dividend requirements. Keep in mind, it's preferred dividend requirements. Even if the firm does not declare a dividend for preferred shareholders, you still have to calculate the preferred dividend requirement as if it were declaring a dividend and subtract that from net income. So to do that, you essentially take the 50,600 shares. The par value is $4, and you times that by the 4%. to get your preferred dividend requirement of $8,096. You're going to take your net income reported of $239,400 minus your preferred dividend requirements. You're going to divide that by the number of shares outstanding for the entire year, and that will be your basic earnings per share calculation. Simple and straightforward. The next problem requires a basic earnings per share calculation, in addition, a diluted earnings per share. So our company, Kaiser Stamping, began the current year with 500,000 common shares outstanding and issued an additional 120,000 shares on September 1st. So right there, you know that the current year, 500,000 common shares outstanding are going to get a weight of 12 months out of 12 months. So the total 500,000 common shares will be included as your denominator in both basic earnings and diluted earnings. The company issued additional 120,000 shares on September 1st. So September, October, November, December, that's 4 months out of 12, will be prorated towards the 120,000 shares. Those 120,000 shares will be at 4/12, will be added to the numerator for both basic and diluted earnings per share. The firm has $11 million, 3.5% convertible bonds outstanding for a full year. The interest is calculated for us in the problem at $385,000, which are convertible into 333,000 shares of common stock. This affects only diluted earnings per share because convertible bonds dilute the earnings per share. So the two things we have to do for our numerator for diluted earnings per share is we have to figure out how much interest we would have avoided had the convertible bonds been converted to 333,000 shares of common stock, net of income tax, which is given to us as 40%. On the denominator side for diluted earnings per share, we have to figure out how much of the 333,000 shares of common stock are reflected in the denominator. In this case, the convertible bonds were not converted, and they were outstanding for the full year. So first, let's tackle our basic earnings per share. So as you can see, we work on our outstanding shares first. We had 500,000 outstanding shares given to us in the problem, which were outstanding at the beginning of the year. And they get a weight of 12 out of 12 months for the full 500,000. The new issue on September 1st was issued on September 1st, which gets 4 months out of 12, so the 120,000 shares outstanding on a weighted average of 40,000. Therefore, our total weighted average shares outstanding for our basic earnings per share calculation will be 540,000 shares. As far as the numerator is concerned, our earnings per share is going to be the net income of $4,200,000, which is given to you in the problem, minus the preferred dividend required, which is going to be the $1,200,000 par value times 4%, which is $48,000. That $48,000 gets subtracted from the net income and divided by the weighted average shares outstanding to give you $7.69. Moving forward to the diluted earnings per share, you're going to take your basic share numerator of the $4,200,000 minus the $48,000, and now you're going to calculate the interest that you would have saved had the bond, convertible bond, converted. The convertible bond gives off $385,000 of interest for the year. The $385,000 would have been fully saved had the bond been converted, because we go back to the first of the year. The $385,000 times 100 minus the tax rate of 4%. Therefore, what we're really saving is not the full $385,000. We're saving 60% of that, because only 60% of the $385,000 gets added back to net income. 40% is deductible interest on our tax return. So essentially, we get a tax benefit with the 40%. So the $231,000 gets added to the numerator of your basic earnings per share. You divide that by the $540,000 basic earnings per share, and you simply add 100% of the 333,000 convertible shares to get to $5.02. The next problem is similar to the one we just did, except the firm has 11,500,000 5%, 1.5% convertible bonds on June 30th. So the convertible bonds were issued on June 30th. They were not issued prior to that, and they were not part of the beginning balance for the year. Therefore, we have to prorate both the interest and the number of shares, 330,000, to our diluted earnings per share. But first, let's calculate the basic earnings per share. The basic earnings per share will be the 420,000 common shares outstanding, which will get the full 12 over 12 calculation. So 420,000 common shares get 100% weighted average. We issued an additional 300,000 shares on September 1st. So September, October, November, December, that's 4 months out of 12. So 300,000 times 4 divided by 12 will be your weighted average shares for your earnings per share, basic earnings per share denominator. So here it is. The 420,000, all of it is considered weighted average. The 300,000, 4/12 of it is considered weighted average. So your denominator for your basic earnings per share will be 520,000. Now the numerator for your earnings per share is going to be the 4,100,000 net income minus the preferred dividend requirement. The preferred dividend requirement is the 1,170,000 par value at 3% convertible. 3% non-convertible, I'm sorry. So that number basically is 35,100, which is calculated below. It shows you how you do that. You take the 1,170,000 times 3% to get 35,100. That 35,100 is subtracted from your net income. You divide that by 520,000, which you've calculated here, to get a $7.82 earnings per share. Basic. Now you take your earnings per share basic numerator of the 4,100,000 minus 35,100 for preferred dividend requirement. You have to add back the convertible bond interest at net of tax. That interest is going to be the 11,500,000 convertible at par value times 1.5% times 1/2. The reason why you take a half and not 100% of it like you did in the other problem is because the convertible bond was issued on June 30th. Therefore, that equals $60,375 because you took 100% minus the 30% tax rate to get to the $60,375. Add that to your basic earnings per share numerator, and as far as the denominator is concerned, you take your basic earnings per share denominator right here, and now you add back the 600. You have to add back the calculation for the convertible bond, the weighted average shares on that for half a year. So the company had 330,000 shares convertible into common stock. The denominator for the diluted earnings per share will be your basic earnings of earnings per share calculation, 520,000 plus 330,000 times 1/2, or divided by 2, or take 6/12. All that basically is the same fraction. Add that and you get 685,000. So your diluted earnings per share is as follows. Your numerator is going to be 4,100,000 minus your preferred dividend required plus the interest net of tax divided by your denominator of 685,000 to get $6.02.